Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are here today to talk about the emergence of a new kind of business analyst. I'm Chris Chiappinelli, editor of WhereNext. WhereNext is Esri's digital magazine for business leaders and decision makers. So this is a fitting topic for our first ever webcast. We are certainly glad you could join us for it. I thought I'd set up our conversation today with a bit of outside perspective. It comes from Morgan Swink. Morgan is director of the Texas Christian University's Neely Center for Supply Chain Innovation. And in an upcoming WhereNext article, he talked to us about the conversations he's having with business leaders. He says, one of the things I hear most from managers is, we've got the technology now, we've got the data, but we don't have the talent. And he goes on to say, someone who understands the business and can apply analytics skills to business problems. That's the combination of skills that is in greatest demand right now. We're seeing that demand in many business sectors and even in multiple departments within a particular company. And I think our panelists today are a good indication of that. They are working in many different fields, from supply chain to emergency operations, to field data collection. So to get us started, I thought I would introduce them quickly. They are Ahna Miller of Driscoll's. Ahna is the GIS platform manager there at the world's largest berry company. Brandon Stoker is with us as well. Brandon is the senior principal network design lead at Chick-fil-A. Also joining us is Cyhana Lena Williams. Cyhana is a geobusiness consultant and co-founder of the group African Women in GIS. And from Walmart, we have Lucas McDonald, who's the director of emergency operations there at one of the biggest companies in the world. So we're going to hear from them about location intelligence, how it fits into their work, and how they're using business thinking to complement that as they help their companies move forward. So just a message to the attendees, we will leave some time at the end of the hour to answer your questions, and you can feel free to type those as we talk throughout the hour. You should be able to use your webcast panel there on the right side or left side and include your questions. We'll do our best to get to those. All right, so since we're focusing on this combination of business thinking and location analysis, I thought we could start out by hearing how our panelists found that blend, so to say. How did you develop your location skills, and how did you learn to anticipate business needs? Brandon, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. My background's in operations research and optimization. I started working in supply chain around 9 years ago as a consultant for Nike. There I developed a lot of the models that determine where to place distribution centers. So Nike, like a lot of companies, is very matrixed. You basically have to get 10 people to sign off on anything before anything really important can happen. So it wasn't enough just to have good data to get anything pushed forward. You also had to have an understanding of the business and the people within the business. So that's where I learned to really understand and interpret the needs of the people. And really, business needs, in the end, they're just people needs. So as I was able to understand people's needs, I was able to push forward interesting business strategies.
That's an interesting perspective. Ahna, do you want to give us what your background looked like?
Sure. For me, it was a mix of experience and education. I started with my first internship back in 2012 with a sister growing company to Driscoll's called Ryder Affiliated, where I was actually in the field doing the data collection, creating these maps. And then from there, worked in the public sector for a little bit, where I was really understanding how to run some analysis and understand what it was that the city was looking for in its data. And then coming out of that into Clark University for a graduate degree and a master's degree in GIS, and bringing me into Driscoll's, where I really got to sort of the rubber hit the road between both the data side and the analysis, which is what I do now.
Very good. I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot more about your experiences, all of you, as we go, but this is a great overview here. Lucas, how about you? How did that blend come about?
Yeah, before coming to Walmart, I did small market TV weather, background in meteorology. Obviously, location is really important when you're trying to figure out your forecast and figuring out threats, whether it's a tornado warning or an ice storm. Fast forward a few years, and I leave TV and jump into Walmart, and I show up my first day, and there's this giant HAZUS binder sitting on the desk, where you have to look at all the FEMA threats to the locations, and I had absolutely no idea what it was. Didn't know what GIS stood for, and I spent the next 13 years trying to figure it out, and still learning every day.
You have come a long way, I know that. Cyhana, how about you? How did you acquire this blend of skills?
Well, I took mine from education and experience, just as Anna. And as a recent graduate of geography and resource development from University of Ghana, I was able to add some of the things they taught me over there to add to what I taught or what I learned from my work experience from my GIS and tech company, that's Hansen Geodata, where I learned how to add GIS to software. And then I later went to work with the food and beverages company, where we were trying to use GIS to help them in their distribution division. So it's a combination of education, work experience, research, and programs, as well as friends in the circle.
Good. Sounds like a common theme. Like I said, we'll dive into more of those experiences soon. And it's interesting, you all represent, different industries and work environments. I'm curious about, what you would say or how you describe the benefits of having a location analyst with strong business skills. What does that mean in your world, in your work? Ahna, do you want to start with that?
Sure. So with Driscoll's, we work in a really collaborative environment. So being able to harness the business side enables an analyst to just understand what matters to the company and how we can translate data back into problem solving. And so for us, for example, a really recent example that we had was with COVID. We were looking at how we could be rerouting our fruit to alternative but nearby warehouses in the case that we had to shut down one of our warehouses that were housing our fruit prior to being distributed out to the businesses. And so as soon as we knew that we had location data available for warehouses, this basically just enabled this problem solving to begin for us. So understanding that side of the business really enabled us to keep going forward with the business side.
Interesting. How about you, Lucas? How do you describe the benefits?
Yeah, well, I mean, for us, they're huge. And again, I represent the emergency management side of Walmart. Obviously, within Walmart, we use location data to help us on deciding where to build stores and customer interaction and all of that. From my team's perspective, though, just back to the old story about, 2 inches of snow in Minneapolis is very different than 2 inches of snow in Atlanta. For somebody on my team to understand what that means and how a customer in Atlanta is going to react differently to that forecast versus what someone in Minnesota is going to do. That's really helpful for us to be able to then kind of assess the threat and say, based on this threat and based on these business needs, we know we need to take these actions. And so we can do that across the board with every different kind of threat you can think of out there.
It's interesting. Maybe a quick follow-up there, Lucas, because you're working in an environment where a lot of people, a lot of colleagues are probably using location intelligence without thinking of it in that terms, right? They're not GIS specialists. You yourself probably aren't either. But is there a kind of an intuitive sense of the benefits without knowing necessarily what's under the hood?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we've learned to use the dashboards within Esri to tell our story in a very unique way at Walmart. We're using it. We use it, Esri, in combination with something called Workplace by Facebook. And we actually tell our story in a very Facebook-like manner where our key internal customers are almost going to a Facebook story and seeing a dashboard or seeing location data that they may even click a like on, but then they turn around and use that to make a business decision.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice mashup of the data, like heavy data, really powerful data, but a much easier interface for people to use, more intuitive.
That's right.
Cool. Okay, let's see. Each of you are using location intelligence pretty extensively in your work, as we already discussed a bit. I'm wondering if you can, as simply as possible, describe how like a technology like GIS contributes to that on a day-to-day basis. Brandon, do you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, so business leaders in the organizations I've worked at, they always want to rely on data and modeling to help them answer questions. It keeps coming up. Hey, analytics is the future, but often people don't know how to frame the questions to get the answers they really need. So understanding the technology side, it really enables my teams and myself to reframe any requests leaders have into really clear, concise models or clear, concise analytics projects. And then using that technology, we're able to answer their questions really well and really save tons of money for the company and really be able to service the marketplace the way we need to.
Is that, I guess I'm thinking about what that looks like on the ground. Can that range anywhere from, a one conversation to weeks of meetings to understand the problem? How does it look?
So for us, it's very iterative. So our team being the experts in the data, but business leaders understanding what they actually are trying to accomplish. So often it'll be a back and forth where we'll have a problem, we'll try to frame it out for them, present it, but then usually when you present and reframe the problem, then the problem will shift a little bit. And so eventually you get it down to a place where everyone agrees this is the problem we're trying to solve and this is the answers we're trying to get out of it. But us as the analytics people, we can be really good about shaping the question in a way and showing them what is the value you're going to get out of certain types of things. Sometimes people just say, hey, go do something interesting. Other times it's, hey, we really have this very specific question we're trying to answer. And so trying to tease out what's the fastest way to be able to get the answer to that question, or is it something bigger where we need to be able to think about all the ripple effects across the whole system? And if that's the case, then how do we stretch it out and make sure that everybody's brought along in the process?
Interesting. Okay. Ahna, how about you? What does it look like in your world?
Well, we have thousands of acres globally to keep track of, and understanding the locations of these acreage is basically crucial to understanding our business and planning for moves forward in sustainability, better yield, and ultimately just providing the finest berry back to the consumer. One example would be if we're looking for a new location to grow berries, we'll look at factors such as like the water availability, soil type, local community that would be impacted. And all of this can be represented through map layers and spatial analysis that really just provides a visual story back to the end decision maker.
Do you find yourself like getting quicker at anticipating, getting better at anticipating some of the problems that might be presented to you?
Definitely. A lot of that comes in the conversations coming in from higher ups as they're starting to do problem solving. It's a pretty transparent organization. There's a lot of conversation that flows through the open doors. And so being clued into what's going on, what sort of problems we're looking to solve for definitely makes it easier to anticipate as something new comes up.
Right. Lucas, you already started to touch on some of this, but how does that technology help you day to day and help decision makers at Walmart?
Yeah, so even if you go back to just a couple of weeks ago with Hurricane Laura, made landfall in Louisiana and impacted Texas as well. We started every one of our morning emergency operations center calls going over the forecast data and then using the data to tell the story of how we're being impacted by the hurricane. And it's important to show who's closed, like where the stores are closed and where they're damaged, but it's also really important to show leadership where we're open. Excuse me. We were open in Lake Charles just a few days after landfall, and to be able to show leadership, here we have these facilities open, we're going to push merchandise into here sooner than we thought we'd be able to because we've got these green dots showing instead of the red dots. And so just gives a great perspective to take a step back and say, here's the overall picture, and here's where we can move product, and here's where we can serve those customers in those communities.
That kind of hints at a lot of people in the value chain at Walmart, right? If you say that one thing, that it's kind of a cascade effect on merchandise, on store employees, on staffing, on a lot of things, right?
That's right, and even the community giving piece. We know that we have a location here that the community's without power, but we have a generator hooked up to that store, and we can partner with Tyson or somebody to give away food in the parking lot. That's a big deal.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I see some questions coming in already. That's great. Thank you guys for that. We'll keep those on tap. But we do want to hear from the audience now as well. I think it's a good opportunity to get some sense of where you stand in the audience. And we're going to push out our first poll question. We have just a few of those. So we'll take a brief interlude here and do that. And we'll see if this goes up here. Let me just take one quick look at polls and select this one, and we'll launch it. Okay, should be open. You should be able to see that in your webcast dashboard. So just go ahead and vote away. It's a pretty simple one. We're just looking for some context. How many GIS analysts does your organization employ? 1 to 2, 3 to 9, 10 to 99, or more than 100. I see you guys voting. That's great. I'm actually personally curious about this because I've got another article in my head that's coming up on WhereNext, where we speak with a company that employs more than 700 geospatial location analysts. They are basically a global architecture and project management company. Not the norm, but it does show you how integral it can be to many businesses. All right, we're collecting responses. I'll give this maybe 5 more seconds if you guys want to get in some last minute tallies. All right, I think it's trickled off, so I'm going to close this and let's see what we've got. All right, there's one more button I can hit. I think I'm going to share that so everybody gets a look. Okay, so 57%, majority have just 1 or 2 GIS analysts. Only 3% over 100. So that's probably a good indication of the general marketplace. A number, 28% there with 3 to 9. It's interesting. We've definitely seen a lot of examples where there's a small GIS shop, so to say, and the value is still pretty big. The impacts can be large. And I think as folks within the organization start to see that value, those departments tend to grow a bit. All right. Thank you guys for participating in that. Okay, we'll jump back in now. Maybe we can look at a couple of scenarios for context. So you've already shared some with us, but I'm thinking about Cyhana and Brandon in particular. If you could share an example where location analysis and business thinking have helped you in particular. And I guess specifically I'm thinking about like how you present the information, how you make sure it's digestible for an executive or decision maker, and what the outcomes were in this scenario. Cyhana, do you want to start us off?
Sure, thank you. So first of all, you have to understand the industry that you're going to work with, the business that you're going to work with. So taking, for instance, the food and beverages business, you'd have to understand that such a business has needs as well as its customers. So for the business, what they're looking forward to, they want to reduce cost, they want to increase their production, they want to be able to get to the customer easily and more efficiently. And they also want to get the customer exactly what they want. And on the customer side, they want it to be more available to them. They want their products to be more available to them. They want it to be also accessible to them. And they also want it to be affordable. And the only way for your prices to be affordable is only if your cost of operations does. Not only that, but it's a factor to reduce your cost of production and your price. So in understanding these factors for the business, you can then ask them exactly what they want to do. And after explaining, then that's when you can now think on their term how you can envision what they want to achieve. So in the food and beverages industry, you want to achieve efficiency of distribution. Therefore, they would have to demarcate their area of sales, that's the whole country, or the areas that they provide their customers with products. And you then have to know the location of the customers. And in location, it's not a general location. You'd have to understand the precise location of the customer, the exact X and Y, latitude and longitude of the customer. And in that, you then have to pick data on also the amount of the products that they buy. And in that, you can do more analysis as to how much or how to demarcate the areas of sales. So every business has the kind of factors they use to demarcate their areas of sales. Some use volume, some use the number. So then you'd have to ask the business how exactly they would like to arrange their sales area or how they would like to demarcate it. And with all those questions that you keep asking, you start to understand the business and understand how you can use your skills more. So most of the work kind of boils down on you, because you'd have to think about how you can envision what they want to achieve, because they can't really understand what you do, but all they know is that you can get it done for them. So you would have to ask the questions as time goes on, and then be using your skills to answer it for them. So that's the first part about it. And then through that, you can get what they need you to do for them. So that's how I help the food and beverages industry, the company I work for. And right now, their whole sales of operation is falling on the work that I did for them.
That's great. And interesting. It sounds a little bit like Brandon's experience with some iterative process. You don't ask all the questions up front. You have to kind of feel it out as the project goes on sometimes.
Exactly.
Okay. Brandon, do you want to share a vignette or scenario that you've been through?
Absolutely. Yeah, so working at Nike and the transition of everybody to the Amazon model, where you're expecting, you make an order, you're going to get it in 2 days. So Nike in the past has always been brick and mortar. You walk into the store, you buy your shoes, and you walk out. So as that transition happened, our digital sales are increasing significantly, but we didn't really have a footprint to be able to support 2-day delivery. So I was able to take the data and basically layer, here's where all our customers are, here's where all our digital orders are happening, and then layer on top of that, here's where we have stores, and here's where we have, factory stores or other types of stores. And then Nike's also a little tricky because each store they're all specialty stores. So your Jordan store doesn't have the same product as your Nike factory store. So if someone makes an order, you can't often deliver from the stores themselves as well. So then we layer on the distribution network, and being able to, so my team put together a plan for where would we put new distribution centers to be able to support the marketplace, to be able to get 2-day shipping to the United States, essentially, at a reasonable cost. You can always airship stuff. That's the fastest way, but also the most expensive way. So being able to come up with a plan across the whole system where we have distribution centers in all the right places, supporting the stores and supporting the .com industry as we grow.
I'm sure that's a very popular exercise these days among a lot of companies, trying to sort that out and do it as efficiently as possible. Maybe we can jump back to Ahna just for a quick follow-on, because you talked a little bit about the distribution scenario, and I'm curious about whether you think in particular about how you present information. I know that location analysts can sometimes get maybe a little lost in the maps and the beauty of the scenarios that they're presenting on maps, but do you think about what it's going to look like to an executive and a decision maker, and do you kind of cater to that?
I do a lot of time, as sad as it does make me, because I do end up going toward the map side of it. A lot of time it does come back into a spreadsheet, but that ends up being where we're able to do pivot tables and joining up with other data sources that we need to complete the analysis for the sake of answering the problem at stake. So in the end, yes, that is something we have to take into consider, is a way that we can get it into a format that everybody can use down the line.
Okay, makes sense. Let's see, maybe a question about development, hiring. I'm wondering about the scenario in the marketplace these days. Have you seen that these skills, this combination of skills in particular, is hard to find? And almost a two-part question, are there certain signs that tell you either a job candidate or a colleague in the organization has good business awareness and also strong location analytics skills? Brandon, what's your experience been there?
Yeah, so finding this nice blend, it's always been hard, and this space continues to be extremely competitive. I really appreciate partnerships with universities that train for this skill set, but sometimes you have to build your own pipelines. So I'm always on the lookout for smart, data savvy individuals that have the potential to develop their business understanding or to pick up additional technical skills. The problem today, I feel like, is there's so many different avenues of analytics. Data science is really popular right now, but what that means is so many different things. Someone can be an expert in GIS, but not understand anything about forecasting. Somebody could be an expert in forecasting and not understand different aspects of analytics. So I look for, sometimes you have to find people that just they've been able to prove themselves in one area of analytics, and then find out if can they have a conversation. Are they, for me, it's about them being willing to work with others and collaborate with others. They probably are usually the smartest person in the room, but do they act like they're the smartest person in the room, or do they value people's skills that are different than their own skills?
Yeah, interesting perspective. Lucas, have you had some experience with this?
When you put that poll up, I didn't see the option for 0 because I have none in my department. I made a hire about a year ago, and I looked for somebody that I needed a good communicator. In emergency management, you always have to be able to communicate. So I needed a strong communicator. Then I looked for somebody that had other skill sets. And one, this person had a meteorology background, which from my experience, I know that meteorology lends well to the location piece. And so hired him about a year ago. And just before I jumped on this, we're in our virtual kind of meeting room that we have going 24/7. And I'm like, I need to jump off to do this cast. And he's like, well, wait, I got to tell you about something. And he just had a significant breakthrough in our locations and their proximity to bad air quality, basically, due to smoke and other issues. And so we can kind of have run the analytics and understand these 10 or 15 stores. We need to take these specific safety measures versus these, which we don't have to take the same measures at this time. And he was so excited. I mean, look on his face. I mean, he had to keep talking about this, and I was trying to jump off, right? It was a great moment for me because here I've hired somebody that doesn't have the location analyst skills, but has learned over the year and is really enjoying it at the same time.
Cool. Yeah, that's good perspective. I think we're going to go to our next poll question. Let me take a look here, see if we can cue that up. All right. Done that one, and the next one is coming out to you now. Let's see if you see it. All right, so I'm curious really about the audience and if they've had similar experience to Brandon and Lucas there. We're pushing out that poll, so I see you're voting. That is great. I guess the idea is, how would you characterize your organization's ability to attract or develop this new kind of analysts? And that could be consistently difficult, could be occasionally difficult, or maybe you're lucky and it's been easy to find these folks. All right, so polling is in progress. I'm watching the numbers move. Interesting. Let's give it 5-10 more seconds here. And it goes back to really the quote that I opened with from Morgan Swank there at Texas Christian University. He's really starting to see this as a trend among business leaders who are looking for these skills. And, hearing from Brandon, Lucas, I think in general this might be kind of a hard mix to find, but also a burgeoning one. So, all right, let's close this poll out, and then I'll share these results. And it's actually a pretty close mix there, close race between consistently difficult to find these candidates and occasionally difficult. If we had more time, we'd probably ask you what industry you're in and see if there's some breakdown there that affects the mix. But 40% occasionally, and just 5% of you are finding this an easy role to fill. So that's probably why you're on the webcast with us. Okay, really interesting. I wonder if any of our panelists have worked with a sponsor. In the business community, that can also be can often be a useful way to somewhat evangelize the work that you're doing, or make sure that it's getting to the people in an organization who need it. Maybe you don't even know that they need it. So let's go around the room here on this one. Ahna, have you had any experience with working with a sponsor or an evangelist?
I'm very grateful that there have actually been multiple at Driscoll's that fit this role for me. A member of our global research and development team, Michael Christensen, had worked with me in my very first internship, and we ended up working together in my current role as well. He has been a really key component of bringing GIS back to the forefront of complex problems in the business, and he just sort of has that understanding of where GIS can benefit the business for problems beyond my department. And then also more recently, my immediate supervisor, our forecasting director, has really done well to acquaint me with the supply chain as well as sales and operations planning projects. And I really give him credit. He's taken a lot of time to listen and understand the base of what GIS can do, and then further connect me with projects that can help represent the value that GIS brings to the business.
Yes. So kind of a mix there of somebody who knew GIS going into it, and then somebody who was more from the business side, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Interesting. Okay. Let's see, Cyhana, did you have any experience with that?
Yeah. So my boss from the GIS and tech company, I used to follow him around when he used to meet clients and others. So I kind of learned from how he was speaking. Sometimes we have these discussions where he's explaining how GIS can be inculcated into business. So I got my first more exposure from him. And the second was from my boss from the food and beverages company. After showing him some of the things or how I get the work done, he started to appreciate the skill more, and we started having these conversations as to how we could even expand it, how other businesses can also add this to their strategies. So it comes from both people who already had knowledge of it and others who are now learning because of how I took them through and how I done with it.
Can you just say the last sentence? I don't know if it was me, but I missed that. The last sentence.
Yeah, I said it also comes from people who already had an idea of it and people who I had to show and that appreciated it after I showed it to them.
Yeah, really interesting that you are able to shadow somebody essentially and participate in some client meetings, or at least be a fly on the wall, so to say, to soak up some of that business knowledge, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Lucas, I know there's a lot of attention in your area of Walmart from executives, from a lot of people who are making decisions across the organization. Have you felt like you've had a sponsor? Do you feel like you need one, or is it just already there organically, so to say?
Yeah, no, I think for the first 10 years of my career, I felt like I needed one. We, at that point, just kind of using open source platforms, doing what we could with the data. 10 years though into my career, I get a new leader, and on day one, he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I need a GIS platform." And just by coincidence, a couple of weeks after that, we met with the American Red Cross, who's really a leader in this space. And he was really impressed by what American Red Cross was doing, and came back and said, "Got it, let's go get one." And so that was a huge win for us, as we were able to really kind of really dive deeper into what GIS and location analysis could do for us.
Interesting. Okay. And maybe you can describe it. I've heard a little bit about the operations center, and it's different days right now, of course, during COVID, but in normal times, what would it look like, and what kind of access do executives and sponsors have to what you're doing to the emergency center?
Yeah, so I think, what we're doing now in COVID is no different than what we were doing before. We're telling a story of how the company is being impacted by things going on around the world. We're doing it now virtually, but we're still using GIS and the platforms very heavily to tell that story. Every day we send out kind of an EOC brief. Here are the things that we're watching, and whether it's a tropical storm or it's a fire in Oregon or a typhoon in China, we're telling that story with visuals, and we need those maps to say, here are the stores in Japan about to be hit by a typhoon, or here's the evacuation due to a chemical leak, somewhere in Texas. So we're using it very heavily day to day. You got to imagine, even outside of 2020, every day something is happening that's impacting Walmart somewhere across the globe. Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about the scale. Obviously, you don't get too much bigger than Walmart, but disruption is really everywhere these days. It's tough for any business with even a little bit of scale to escape it. So that kind of awareness seems to be more and more important every day.
Exactly right.
Okay. Brandon, how about you? Have you worked with any sponsors, or how do you feel about the importance of that?
Yeah, similar to Lucas, I feel like every company has to start somewhere. So early on in my career, I felt like I didn't really have any sponsors, and it was about building a brand of, like, the analytics team has to have a brand of friendly, incredibly skilled, but also good partners and good collaborators that we're really trying to help solve your problems, people's problems. And so when I realized that, at that point, I was able to do some things on my side to improve our brand, but then also different leaders started to see there is a lot of value in this. And once you have one or two strong leaders who are able to pull the team forward, I was fortunate to be able to have leaders that valued my input and gave me the space to develop and communicate the results across the business. And really, it's about trust both ways. So as I developed my brand within the organization, as the leaders were able to put trust in me and let me do the work that I was able to do, I think that's where the most value comes in. So even now, as it's trusting the analytics people to do their job really well and to be able to create value for the organization, and analytics people to trust the leaders to listen to them and to not shut down their ideas.
That's an interesting perspective. And I like that you brought up the collaborative aspect of it all. I mean, to some extent, it feels like a GIS department or location analysts are, one of the top tiers of shared services. A company can get a lot of value out of the work that a location analyst does, some of the work that you guys are doing in particular. And that just has a bigger impact if you're proactive, if you're collaborative, and that seems to have been your experience. So that's pretty interesting to see. Let's see. I'm curious about historical perspective. We've kind of glancingly touched this along the way, but if you look back on your careers, some of them aren't that old. But do you see that this combination of skills is more common now than when you began? Maybe we can start with an international perspective. Cyhana, you co-founded that group, African Women in GIS. Do you see the use of location intelligence growing in the business community in Africa?
Yeah, some sectors have actually already had it in their business operations. So the sectors that have to do more with engineering, those who have to do with the actual field work, they have already been using GIS. But for the industries that are now coming out with more of the traditional marketing and sales operations, they are the ones that are now trying to add it to their operations. So something like the food and beverages companies, most of them, I can tell you, do not use GIS. They use, if anything, the basic form of data analysis, but without the location aspect. So it's now that we have a lot of tech companies that are opening up the awareness of the tech industry, and in line, the GIS is also coming up gradually. So in fact, COVID has actually helped a lot of people to know that there is a field like GIS, and this is what they can do with it. So it's both ways. In some cases, it was already being used, but in others, it is now growing. So it goes both ways. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Brandon, have you experienced it?
Yeah. So over the past 10 years or so, the technology has increased so much. Like the technological capabilities of any tools in this space are so much more powerful than they were 10 years ago. Our computers are faster. The visualization is so much better. And so I feel like it is more common just because it's more powerful. Like you don't have to be a Python coder to still create some value in this space, where I think a long time ago you had to have such strong technical skills, and even then you'd be building these awesome models, but then be able to show just a very small piece of it to the organization, where now the tools are so much better, and so then a lot more people are able to pick them up and develop their own skills. It's still a critical skill set, and it's still hard to find like just the right person. But I think the stronger emphasis of organizations on this space and universities and developing this space, I think it's much stronger than it was.
Okay. Ahna, how about you? Have you seen any trends there in agriculture or beyond?
Definitely similar to what Ben just mentioned, but in the general, across agriculture,
Looks like you're breaking up a little bit on that.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, let's try that again. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, sure. I mentioned about the enhancement of the technology over the last 10, 12 years. And then the agriculture space, seeing companies, large and small, seem to be trending towards use of every I think with the advancements in things like everyday drone use, access to satellite, easy access to scouting apps, for example, it becomes more and more of a commonplace practice in the ag sphere.
Okay, good. We had like 92% of that, so I think we filled in a couple of the blanks. Thank you for that. Lucas, how about you? Have you seen any changes?
Yeah, I think so. We've gone from, and despise especially when it comes to telling a story about something that's happening during disaster. A JPEG is old the minute you hit save on it, and so we've gone from sending a static map to this spring our CEO asking for a very interactive map with analytics attached to it. That it's no longer, we're gone are the days of a PDF, right? Where now you're sending, here's the link to this interactive map, and then you can go in and make a decision or take a look at yourself for yourself. I think, and as the executive level does more of that, that will drive resources down the chain to build more location analysis into each business, I think.
Okay, interesting. Okay, we're going to pause again. This is another poll, actually our last. So this is your last chance to vote. I'm going to push this out right now. And you should see that in your panels. Every vote counts. Okay, so we're thinking about kind of how the business analyst or the new business analyst delivers the most value and in which area. So this is a multiple choice question. It may be a little bit limited because it's multiple choice, because I think there are a lot of areas of the business where people like our panelists contribute, but we came up with our best guess at a short list. And that could be strategic planning and executive decisions, might be supply chain, maybe market planning, or customer analysis, customer understanding, or more of a site selection tool. All right, a lot of motion here, a lot of horses in this race. So we'll give that another 10 seconds again. And we know, again, that's just a sampling. In WhereNext articles in particular, we're starting to hear about like business risk analysis as a growing field for location intelligence, specifically to do with climate risk and things of that nature. So that used to be an insurance company focus, and now it's broadening into the general business community. So that's just one of many other examples. Okay, we'll close that out now. Interesting results. All right, let me share those and we'll take a quick look. So half of the audience says strategic planning and executive decisions. That's the biggest vote getter here. And then the second and third were market analysis and customer analysis. So the lowest was actually supply chain. So Brandon, you're outnumbered here on this one. But obviously a lot of good work going on there too. And then site selection, kind of a traditional area of focus. Excellent. Okay, so let me hide that. I think that's what we want to do to get us back here. And maybe a few more questions, and I guess a reminder to the audience to submit yours as we go. I'm going to take a quick look at that, and we do have those coming in. So do feel free to add those, and we will leave a little time here. But in terms of our next question, this is actually a quick one. Maybe we can do a lap around the room. If you had to write a job description for this new analyst that we're talking about, how would you describe the role? And just a few terms, a few words to describe that person. Cyhana, do you want to try that out? What words come to mind for you?
I'll try my best. Considering the kind of exposure the business has had, I would say you have to know how to think geographically. Because most of the decisions I had to make were because of how I could think in terms of understanding the feature of where I was located, or how they want to divide their area, and also understand the business itself. So you'd have to know how to think geographically in terms of solving the problem for your customer or for the business. That's the number one thing now I'd like to come out.
Okay. Yeah. Geographic awareness, so to say. Okay. Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, in just a few words, technical skills in supply chain optimization, simulation, operations research, industrial engineering, GIS, like something in the technical space around those areas, and then problem solving, business partnership, and collaboration.
That's a good list. Nice mix of the technical and the business, so to say. Ahna?
Collaborative in nature, cross-functional work, and then initiative applying GIS principles to solve complex problems in a business or research environment.
Cool. Lucas, what about you?
I'm very different than the rest of the answers. Enjoys the chaos. It's probably the way I would word it, because once you have that skill and people know that you have that skill, they'll come to you for anything and everything at any given time. And then the other piece of it is, so many times I've seen one of us standing at the command post with executive leadership over the shoulder saying, show me this, show me that, go here, go there. And so being able to handle that pressure is incredibly important.
And I was thinking you might add like curiosity, because that's what it sounded like when you just described that conversation with your colleague before you got on this webcast, right? You seemed like somebody who was genuinely curious about problems or finding ways to solve them. Does that fit too?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and to go out and discover something new and discover something new for the company is very exciting.
Cool. Ahna, how about you in terms of chaos? I'm curious if anybody else experiences that, or if that's an emergency operations thing.
Oh no, it definitely applies. I think one of the funnest natures of my job is being on those front lines of people saying, hey, we have this problem, we need to solve it right now. We have fires going on, we need to understand what the air quality looks like. We have COVID happening, we want to make sure we know where to route our berries. So being able to take that in stride, translate it into GIS terms and into analysis that you know you can do on the fly to get those results that they need. So yes, chaos, but it's all so much fun.
Good. And there's always the weekends. What about business value? And you've talked about this in various ways and various questions, but if somebody in your company, a colleague who doesn't understand a location analysis necessarily asks about what the value is there some anecdote you use or a simple statistic, any way to explain it to them? Let's go back to you, Ahna, on that one.
Me personally?
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I don't necessarily have a direct statistic or value, but one thing that I do usually bring up is I have a dashboard that shows the numbers of acreage we have that are mapped, that are in process of being mapped, the different field statistics going on with that. And it just sort of shows this visual that doesn't necessarily exist anywhere else in our company of what we actually have as assets. And that tends to be the thing that I'm able to physically show that sort of shows what it can bring to the company in terms of value. It's just adding that visual appeal.
Interesting. Lucas, is there a way that you summarize it?
Yeah, I showed the stores in the Pacific Ocean at that 0 lat long, because sometimes you show the errors in the data and it'll tell a story very quickly of how important it is to be able to see that, because you won't notice that in a spreadsheet, but you plot something incorrectly and it's you catch it very quickly.
You guys sell scuba gear there, right?
We do. We have a unique store there. It's a barge in the ocean.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised. All right, we're doing pretty well on time here, so maybe I'll sneak in one last question, and then we'll go to some of the audience queries. Since you guys are speaking mainly or often to decision makers and executives, I wonder if you have any advice for them on how they might get the most out of location analysts, or this new analyst we're talking about. Cyhana, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, and I would especially like to direct this to African businesses because there is kind of a low awareness of GIS and what they can use it for in their businesses. So I would say that the number one thing is they should try and implement location-based analysis and more basically implement location analysis and try and get someone to add to their marketing or strategic planning team who has that idea or has that way of thinking or skill. in location analysis because it's very important. As the world is going, you need to know exactly where your customers are and how to get them. You need to know where you can position your stores and the best places that are perfect for your business. You need to understand the terrain because it's not just knowing the number of people who are located in the place. It's about knowing the areas that are going to grow in the future. So more of thinking into the future, making plans into the future. You need to understand the location feature of the places around you. So yeah, they really need it.
That's interesting. And it coincides with the poll, right? There, what, 50% of the vote takers said that they're focused on strategic planning and executive decisions. So that's where you're advocating folks to head. That's a good direction there. A lot of interesting work to be done. Let's see, Brandon, what's your perspective there?
Yeah, I would just say to trust your people. So organizations go to great efforts to hire these type of people, strong analytics skills, but then often don't let them have a voice. So if any of these people that you're hiring, these could be great decision makers within your organizations in the future. They have the technical skills. Often they have a business understanding. They usually know more than most people about what's actually going on across the map. So, bring them in conversations, just ask them, like, what would you do differently? What are things we're not seeing? And just trust them and give them the space and the training to grow, and it will really help your organization long term.
That's a good perspective. It's both sides of the coin, right? I mean, Cyhana, you were able to kind of maybe invite yourself occasionally into the client meetings. It sounded like you were pretty active in playing a role. That's part of it. But the leaders also have to recognize that it's important to bring in these new analysts into those conversations so that they can learn, develop the business skills, et cetera. Interesting. Okay, let me open up this question panel here. See if I can do this. And they have been coming in for a while now. We're going to basically turn this over to you, the audience, for a little bit. And I'm going to do my best on the fly to look through these questions. I know some of them might be technical, but others we can throw out to the panelists. All right. Oh, well, this is a really interesting question. Very personal question, but maybe we'll get some advice from our panelists. Somebody with 25 years of advanced business experience, has an MBA and a certificate in GIS from Penn State, go Lions, and completed over 90 Esri virtual campus courses. Can't even get an interview. So that's an interesting dynamic there. Any advice? Maybe that goes back to some of the qualifications or skills or traits that you guys talked about when we asked what this kind of role, who that kind of person, that person would show, or traits that they would show. Any advice to somebody like that? I know that's a very specific scenario there. Anybody want to jump on that? Okay.
I can jump in a little bit. Not that I'm on the 25 years of experience, Mazel tov on that, but I would say one, it's a really difficult market out there right now, just with the state of everything going on in the pandemic. However, you do have something going for you, being that working with the GIS sphere, at least, we can be very remote pretty easily, and so that does help. I would say also, having recently had the experience of going through hiring and looking through stacks and stacks and stacks of resumes, take a double check at that and really see what you're actually trying to sell. Are you trying to sell the business side? Are you trying to sell the GIS side, or somewhere in between? I know it's going to be difficult when you're looking at your own resume, but that was really, really eye-opening for me. And I totally trashed my previous resume when I actually was on the hiring side of it, because seeing if people are getting stacks of resumes, they're not going to be going through your paragraphs of information. And so really seeing what you're actually communicating at a 30-second glance is very helpful.
That's good input. Anybody else? Last thoughts?
I would just say that, maybe think out of the box on who you're applying to. It may be something like emergency management or some other organization that you wouldn't typically apply to, but they have a need, they just may not know it yet.
And I wonder if they're using different language too, right? It can be hard to read between the lines to see what they are looking for. Is there any language that you guys might look for in those atypical roles?
I don't know about a specific language, but I think, tell the story and even include images on the kind of data that you could provide. A resume can have, an attachment to it, right? And show some great stories there.
Okay. All right, I'll look through the rest of the list here. There's quite a few, and some specific call-outs. And of course, everyone asked about recording. I apologize. I should have said that up front. But yes, we are recording, and we will share that. It takes a little bit of time after we finish the webcast to get that up, but it'll be available to everybody who registers. So we'll send you a note on that. Let's see, Lucas, actually a specific question focused on data, I guess, here. Besides layers of data from, I guess, National Weather Service and NHC, where do you find the best data for forecasting?
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. And in some cases, you have to go find a relationship with like a weather company. National Weather Service does a great job, but we have a relationship with WeatherBell, which is a weather company that helps us bring model data and run it against our store locations. But it is difficult to find good stuff out there for sure.
And I'm sure that's not weather alone, right? In all of your experience, there's probably a hurdle you have to get over to get the right data. That's the foundation of almost everything you do. Is that pretty accurate? Have you, Cyhana or Brandon or Ahna, have you focused on that? Do you feel like you've established a platform of data and now you're doing all the good work?
In my case, the data had to be collected from scratch. So we had to employ data collectors to actually travel the whole country and pick over 80,000 customer data. So most of the time, especially in Africa, the data is not readily available. You would have to create your own data. You'd have to design how you want to collect your data. The factors you'd want to add to your data is all in you. It's all on you. So you would have to determine what you want to collect and go and get it yourself, unfortunately. But some general data you can get online.
Yeah, that's good advice. Sometimes it's a lot of legwork that goes into that process, but generally it pays off in time. Okay, let's see. I'm wondering from the panel, with limited GIS resources, how they currently keep their data current and accurate in this rapidly changing world. So another data question, but I guess a little more focused on the context of COVID and how the world's changing. Anybody want to jump on that? Brandon, anything come to mind?
Yeah, so on the whole data side question, the analytics team has to be able to prove value quickly, and the data can take a long time. So for me and my teams, often we try to, where can we add value when we don't have the good data while we're trying to get the data moving along? Realistically, the leaders organization should be tying these teams with the data experts in IT or other places in the organization. So we partner with a couple organizations within Chick-fil-A, and we have a data steward who basically we all work through, and their job is to help us to be able to have clean data. It doesn't mean we always do. That's the hardest part about any of this, is getting the data right. But the team should be able to create value with the data they have in the short term while you're trying to get to the perfect solution.
Ahna, do you want to finish it out? We don't have too much time, but any thoughts from you on data?
Sure, I can just add, I think automation where possible, especially when it comes into the data. We have a small army of teams in our local districts that are in charge of doing all of the data collection, and it's a huge lift on their side, and we definitely owe a lot to them. So one of the big focuses on my job lately is really figuring out where we can automate what to help relieve that lift. Databases have a lot of capability, as do Python scripting tools. And so being able to serve out what you can that can kind of ease that lift and burden and make it so it's hopefully a little bit more accurate on the regular is definitely a big piece of it, I think.
Very good. Well, I hate to close this out in the middle of a good discussion. That really was interesting and I think illuminating certainly for me and for some of us in the audience too. For those of you watching this live today, in the next week or so, you should receive an email that's going to invite you to join the Esri brief. Basically just a bi-weekly newsletter. And it features WhereNext content, some podcast content, really just to keep you in touch with this topic in particular, how location analysts are helping out businesses, and also burgeoning topics in the business world like climate risk, climate change, and a lot more. So we hope you'll stay in touch with us that way. In the meantime, a great amount of thanks from me and the whole WhereNext team to our panelists for a great discussion. Ahna Miller, Brandon Stoker, Cyhana Lena Williams, and Lucas McDonald. And thanks to all of you for being part of our first webcast here at WhereNext. For WhereNext, I'm Chris Chiappinelli. We will see you next time.